Hey, welcome to Whitecap Regatta Reports, talking about the Pan Am Games 2023 and the incredible results that we got from Canada. Today, back on the podcast, Lee Parkhill, who recently got gold medal in the sunfish class. Lee, congratulations.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that and happy to be back on the show. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Here's a trivia question for you first. Has Canada ever won the gold in sunfish before?
Yeah, and I know this one, 1999, Oscar Johansson. And the reason I know is because of our Oakville Yacht Squadron connection.
Oh, okay.
So him and Bernie Letmer were, good mentors of mine when I first started on the national team, and GTA sailors as well. The first email I got when I officially won gold was from Oscar saying that OIS Sailing School is a sunfish gold medal factory, and enjoy the celebration. So I knew that one.
Okay, enough about those guys. We've got the 2023 gold medalists sitting from me. Tell me about the event, like from your perspective, from opening ceremonies through medal race.
Yeah, for sure. So we landed in Chile. There was the Lululemon suitcases, which was a big selling point for a lot of people, or an exciting moment when you're at your first big game.
Those were cool.
Suitcase full of clothing and your kind of list of what clothes you wear on what day or for what event.
You arrived at the village. You got all your Lululemon gear.
Yeah, so we showed up at the cabin kind of hotel complex that they had as the Athletes Village. It was like, I would say, quite the experience, like Chilean experience, and we all kind of ended up loving it, and we called it cabin life, and we had our Canadian bunkies all together, but it was really like summer camp. There was these small cabins that had a living room, a small kitchenette, one bedroom, and a small bathroom on the main floor, and then upstairs it was just a loft with like 4 single beds in them. So we were anywhere from 3 to 4 athletes / coaches in each of the cabins, and we had like 6 of them next to each other for the whole Canadian contingent, and then all the other.
Who were your cabin mates?
Yeah, so I stayed with Galen and Luke.
Cool. So then day one, when did you start? Did you race like a couple days later, or can't remember?
Yeah, so I think that was all on. We landed on a Monday. I think everyone's races didn't start till the next weekend, so we actually had like 4 or 5 days in the middle. So my whole MO was just trying to train as much as possible. Sailing 2.5 hours every day for like 3 days, and then slowly started to taper the last day, even right before the first day of race. And I went out just for 30 minutes with Andrew Lewis, and we just kind of looked at the sail and kind of got used to each other, leaving the harbor together and stuff to get ready for the first race day.
I was going to say, was Andrew with you those first days as well, or did you have like a kind of sunfish specific coach?
So I guess for those 4 or 5 days, everyone kind of did their own routines, just prepping for the actual event to start. The Olympic classes and kind of the priority classes, I would say, and that was kind of talked about in the goal setting the first day. Like, we knew there was events we were trying to qualify for the Olympics. There was other non-Olympic classes, and like we kind of understood our place in the whole spectrum, and that kind of set the tone during that meeting as well. So like, for example, Sarah, Fila, the 49er, and FX, like they had their kind of dedicated coaches, but then they did a coaching schedule every day depending on who was going to race at what time. They'd make sure that everyone had a coach, or as best as possible, everyone had a coach with them. So I actually ended up working with Kenny, Vaughn, and Andrew, and it kind of rotated by day, depending on who was out on the course. So the Sunfish shared a course with the laser and the radial. So for example, Sarah might be at the 1 o'clock start. She would finish around 2:45, and the Sunfish would be going out for a 3 o'clock start. So Vaughn and Sarah would wrap up. They'd do a quick debrief on the water, organize someone else to tow Sarah in and give her jacket and her protein shake or whatever her routine was, and then Vaughn would stay out on the water with me for my 2 races. So hats off to the coaches. They were doing double duty compared to a normal regatta. They were often out for 4 to 6 races a day. So
these guys are out in the sun, and women are out in the sun all day long, and they have to they have to really be focused on what's happening. And if they're doing like 3 different classes at once, like hats off, man, to the coaches.
For sure. And it wasn't warm either. So the water temperature was like 10, 12 degrees Celsius. Every night was 10 degrees. It would just go to the same temperature as the ocean. And then during the day would get anywhere from 15. And I think we saw like 19 degrees for 20 minutes one day. So like
Wow.
being out there for 4 to 6 hours, like they were all fully bundled.
I did see that like there were penguins. Like, did you guys see penguins on the water or on shore or?
Yeah, so right next to the yacht club, there's like a little island that sticks out. Or I mean, it's a peninsula. There's like a tiny little path, and it turns into a bigger island, and it's a sanctuary for penguins. So it's fenced off. You can't go there, but a lot of people were going to the fence and zooming in with their cameras, and you could see like these little penguins there. So yeah,
Oh,
pretty
that's
cool.
so cool. Have you ever seen a penguin in a sailing venue before?
No, never.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I interrupted again. So you did some training. Did you were able to like line up with any of the other guys during that time?
Yeah, so even back to like March when Luke and I were starting the Sunfish trials, the U.S. sailor Connor Bluin was like very helpful to the two of us, and we kind of the three of us came to quick friends. So in June we trained together in Illinois at the North Americans, and then I was chatting with him before we got to Santiago, and like when's the first day you're going to get on the water? Are we going to train together and that sort of thing? So me and him ended up going on the water together every day, which
Great.
was invaluable for me trying to get up to speed as quick as possible, just having another, really good sailor to line up with during those training days. So,
And he was slash is primarily a sunfish sailor.
yeah, he's a Charleston University sailing coach. So he's a head
Okay.
coach down there. So he's, around sailing full time, and Sunfish is the primary boat that he sails. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we're on to racing.
Yeah. On to racing. So everyone on the team was kind of like, okay, day one, let's just go out and get keepers, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you get first every single race. Anyone listening knows you hardly ever win a regatta, or anyone wins a regatta winning every race. But you need to have consistently good scores, and that varies depending on the fleet and the depth. But for myself, I said, even months before the regatta, if I can average like a 3 during the week, I might, do really well, win a race. I might come fifth in some races or sixth. But if I can kind of average around a 3, I'm going to have a shot for a medal at the end of the week. And the Pan Am's one thing to note is small fleets, right? So
Right.
it's interesting, right? You're not going to a bad race. You're not going to go out and get a 40 because there's not 40 boats. In the Sunfish, I only had 8, but going out and getting a 6 or a 7 also isn't great because then someone wins that race. You're going to get 6 points difference. And in a small fleet, to get 6 points back, you have to beat someone. Even if you come first and they come second every time, it takes 6 races to catch back up that differential, right? So it's hard to put big spreads on people. So every point really matters in those small fleets, right? So, Luke and I, for example, chatted about, okay, you might end up in the second race of the day, you're in the second lap and you're in 4th place. And the guys in first and second they're gone. You're never going to catch them. So it might actually become a battle for third. And that's the only boat you're focused on is that one right ahead of you. And it becomes like a one-on-one battle to try and just get that 1 point.
Right.
Versus if
Right.
you're in like a laser fleet of 50 boats on that second downwind, you're not worried about a single person. You're just trying to go as fast as possible. Because if you have a good downwind, you could pass 10 people still. But in the Sunfish and at the Pan Ams, like the fleets started to get spread out and there was, smaller amount of boats everywhere. So it
Right.
became a mental aspect of a little bit less about just pure boat speed in your own race versus sometimes where is the other boat, and I need to focus on them to actually just pick up that 1 point before the end of the race. For the Sunfish racing, I actually ended up with quite a ridiculous score line. I ended up getting all 1s and 4s. The first day I won the first race. The start of the second race, I was over early. Luckily, it was a prep flag, and I heard them call me so I could turn around, restart, and get back into the race, and ended up 4th. On the second day, I won the first race, and then the second race, classic, just port starboard. I was on port. I was like, okay, I got to duck Peru. And this is a little bit where I relied on this entire event from my sailing and laser training that I did for 7 years full
Mm-hmm.
time. That really helped me kind of get up to speed, I think, in the Sunfish, but it was also a detriment at times. So, Peru was on starboard. I went on port to duck behind him. And in my mind, my body just went into, okay, you're ducking a boat. You've done this 100,000 times before. But in a
Mm-hmm.
laser, everything lines up with the transom. In the Sunfish, the boom sticks out like 18 inches past the back of the
Oh
boat.
yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like 3 feet up in the air. So my body muscle memory takes over. I just go to duck him, and I'm staring at his transom. I'm like, I'm clear, I'm good. I can start to head up again, and my boom or my mast just smashes straight into his boom because it's sticking out the back of the Sunfish, and I didn't calibrate the difference of how to sail the sunfish. So yeah, I hit his boom. It's a massive crash, and you can hear it. And he kind of looks at me, and I look at myself. I'm like, yeah, my bad. I have to do a 720, get back in the race. And then the next race, I was actually winning at the leeward gates, and I jibed too quickly in the sunfish, and I ran straight into the leeward mark, and I had to do a 360 upwind. And so there was times where, like, I can't say, oh, I should have won every race. That's not what I'm saying. But there was times where, all the training I've done in my life really helped me win races. But then there was times where it's like, I probably needed to sail on the sunfish a little bit more to get a little bit more crisp on some of these maneuvers, which ended up, causing me to spin a few times during the regatta.
It's funny. This summer, I did a clinic with Lisa Ross, I'm sure you know, and she said, as a coach, the most angry she ever gets is when her racers do a bad job ducking.
Sorry, Lisa.
I mean, just if we're going to go 30 seconds into this, tell me some techniques for doing a really excellent ducking upwind.
Yeah, I think if you know you're going to duck somebody, you honestly should start early and pick up some speed in a laser, especially. Like we would often call it a power duck. Like once you're like semi-hiking and you can act like the laser actually accelerates when you bear away onto a close reach. So you can pick up that speed, and then once you've already started to bear away a little bit, you can just time when you actually sheet in and head back up, and trying to just time that like right as you're going back behind the transom. So you're already close hauled again as you're going back behind. A lot of people wait too long, and they start to like, sheet out and duck as a person's going by. And then as a person passes them, then they start to head up and sheet in, and they end up over here versus, over here, just like a tight duck right behind. So I'd say, there's times where you want to kind of delay your duck in case you're hoping that person tacks onto port. For example, if you're getting close to the port lay line, you're trying to hold your lane in case they do tack, so you can keep your lane on port. If you kind of show your cards too early that you're going to duck them, they're probably just going to like slam tack you on top of you. So there's like strategic times where you might want to adjust that, but for the majority of times, if you know you're going to duck someone, just start a bit early so you can actually time when you can head back up and get close hauled again.
Right. Anticipation.
Yeah.
Prepare in advance. Okay, so you're figuring out the dimensions of your craft here.
Day one, realizing that I'm in a sunfish again and not a laser. So pretty much went 1-4, 1-4. And as I'm doing that, I'm averaging 2.5. What's happening behind the scenes against the competition is that the guy from Peru and the guy from Chile, they were getting combinations of scores that were also averaging 2.5 points every day as well. So at the last day of fleet racing, we went out, we did our races, we come in, we check the scores, and we're 2 points apart for all three of us. So if you're within 2 points of someone going into a medal race, for all intents and purposes, you are tied. So we had a legitimate three-way tie for first, and we were mathematically far enough ahead of fourth that we were all guaranteed a medal. So it was a really cool kind of moment where we came off the water of fleet racing. We all knew we had a medal, and tomorrow's medal race, 20-minute kind of winner takes all, whoever crossed the line in what order was going to be the order of the medals and how we stood on the podium. Wow. So it was like a real kind of medal race and what it was designed for, I would say.
Wow, that must have been intense. How were you feeling? I guess you probably were happy that you knew you had a medal, but you had Luke Ramsey, had 2 silvers, and
there was a few things that played into it. So yes, obviously you're very happy. It takes the pressure off that you've won a medal. Even if you go out and just completely mess up, you're walking away with a bronze, which at the end of the day, like you're going to be happy with, I think, but yeah, Luke, me and him battled all year. I got the qualification spot. He got silver the last 2 games in 2015 and 2019. We're great friends. So we were obviously chatting at dinner and breakfast, and Luke was kind of, poking me saying, I got 2 silvers the last time. Don't make me look bad. And, you can't get bronze. So that like bronze was off the table. Luke wasn't going to let me get bronze. And then I had Oscar Johansson emailing me saying like, I already won a gold. There's only one. You can only even tie me even if you win a gold, was essentially the message from Oscar. So yeah, I woke up in the morning and I go on Instagram and I'm just scrolling, through my feed as I'm having scrambled eggs or whatever. And I follow the Chilean coach on Instagram. And he put out a poll that morning saying like, who's going to win today's Sunfish men's medal race? And you could vote on Chile, Peru, and Canada. And obviously his followers are South American based and, he's a Chilean coach. So I open it up, I vote on myself, and then it shows me the results after I voted. So I vote and I see the results, and it had 46% Peru, 50% Chile, and a 4% chance for me. And I had voted on myself, so I was one of those 4%. But that was like my kind of moment where I saw this, and I was like, okay, that's the extra motivation I need to kind of go out there. And it was a windy day, a windy race. Hiking was involved. Like, you needed to be powerful. And yeah, there was a couple times during the race where I kind of thought back to that, and I know my shoulders kind of dropped back further hiking, just knowing that like I need to win this race right now. So
okay, so on to the medal race.
Yeah, the medal race. So winner takes all. I went into the race thinking 3 of us. There's not going to be any match racing because you can't control 2 people at once, right? So 3 minutes before the start, I'm doing my kind of normal start setup routine, and the Peru guy actually came to match race me. Anytime I was on port trying to go back to the committee boat, he was on starboard coming straight at me. So I actually had to duck away from him and like spin away 3 times and finally find a path where I could get back behind him and get to the right side of the course over by the committee boat. All the while, Chile's just doing his own thing, getting ready for his own start. And I'm like, in my mind, like, what is happening right now? We shouldn't be match racing each other. There's a 3-horse race here. Anyways, at like a minute 15, I get myself separated and free, and I'm kind of to right of him, so I can kind of.
Why do you think he did that? I mean, maybe you're going to get into this, but why do you think he the one who had less chance to get gold? Like what do you think was the mindset?
I think we were all evenly matched. I think he was probably just saw the opportunity of me being on port closer to the pin and decided, let's at least, I don't know if he was actually going to fully engage until go, or if he was trying to just kind of rattle me a little bit, like get me off my game and focused on him and not paid attention to my proper routine. Right. So,
right.
Yeah. And it kind of did for, a couple minutes. I was like, whoa, this is not what I expected. So maybe his plan actually worked a little bit. But in the last,
did you say anything? Sorry. I was just like, where you're like, hey, dude, there's 3 of us here, or did you just stay focused and sail?
I think I did say it out loud at one point, like, hey, there are, what are you doing? This, we're all tied. There's 3 of us. I don't know if it was actually loud enough for him to hear or not. Anyone who's raced against me knows, like, if I'm wanting to yell, you're going to hear me. So he never said anything to me after. So I think even if I did say it out loud, it was just like, very amicable, like, well, what's going on here?
Right.
But yeah, the last minute I separate and was able to get free of him. And at that point, it was clear that the U.S., Puerto Rico, Chile, they were all setting up to start at the pin. But I actually thought the line was pretty even, and everyone was going to try and tack onto port quickly and race to the starboard lay line, just because of a little bit of wind bend. We thought the right side was going to be better because it was closer to land. And I think every coach and athlete kind of had that strategy in terms of where they wanted to go on the race course. The race is so short. The upwinds are like 6 minutes. That could be your strategy, but in a medal race, positioning is way more important than where you actually go at the end of the day.
Right.
But anyways, you can see them 3 trying to set up at the pin. Peru actually, after match racing me and coming at me, ended up setting up at the start line what I would say too early, and kind of got into no man's land where they didn't have a lot of flow on the foils. They were kind of just sitting at the committee boat waiting to accelerate and go. So I was able to come in up behind at like 25 seconds, hooked him, shot him up into irons even further, and got him like really stuck, and held him there with my own flow until about 10 seconds. And I accelerated and did my own start. So at go, I already had a couple lengths on Peru. And sure enough, he accelerates, tacks onto port, and starts to go out to the right side. At that time, Chile's the next boat underneath me and didn't have a great start compared to the other 2 boats at the pin. So ended up having to tack onto port, and I was able to come across, tack straight in front of Chile. So, we can't control a race against 2 other boats. We're all tied, but it really just worked out that 20 seconds into the race, I was directly in front of Chile and kind of like over top of Peru, knowing that I had a couple length advantage of him off the start. So at that moment, with a short upwind and everyone already on port going the same direction, and I was in a decently controlling position, I really just hiked as hard as I could and just tried to go as fast as I could to the starboard lay line. And everyone pretty much stayed on the port until then, and I was able to get there first. So I rounded the first marking first, but I ended up having a really slow first downwind. I think I kind of like relaxed a bit, where I said like, okay, I don't want to get flags. I just need to hold this position, which was probably the worst thing I could have done. I should have just been like, let's go full steam ahead till the end of this race. So I kind of took my foot off the gas a little bit, trying to not get a flag. But then in doing so, I also wasn't sailing the boat free, and I ended up going pretty slow. Puerto Rico passed me. Peru got like right beside me again, and, and the race kind of reset. We were literally like neck and neck on the first downwind with Peru again. Luckily, I was able to choose the right gate and go back towards the right side of the course again. And kind of rounding that gate, was able to kind of like reset, refocus on the upwind, found my speed again, and was like, okay, like that didn't work on the last run. I got to just like sail the boat free and go fast. And on the second lap, was able to get back ahead before the windward mark. And then I got like 10 lengths of separation, I would say, starting the last run going to the finish, and Peru and Chile rounded right next to each other. So in my mind, it was like, okay, it's going to be hard for them to catch up 10 lengths, but also I know they're going to be fighting each other. It's hard for them mentally to say, like, I'm going to catch up to Lee and get gold when you're right next to silver and bronze. So I looked back a couple times and I could see them a little bit like jostling for position. So I knew, like, okay, just look ahead, sail the next wave. You know how fast a sunfish can go. If you connect a couple waves surfing here, you're going to be at the leeward mark. And I was able to do that and stay ahead until the finish. But I checked the tracker at the end of the day, and I beat Peru by 7 seconds and Chile by 15 seconds. So after 8.5 hours of racing, we were all tied going into the medal race, and it still was only 15 seconds between first and third. So,
oh, that's amazing. So you crossed the line. You won gold. What happened then?
Yeah. Honestly, an amazing feeling. And yeah, crossing the line, knowing that you've won, realizing you're going to stand on the podium saying it soon and hear "O Canada" play and raise the Canadian flag, like all those emotions just race in. As an athlete, there's always a bit of relief when you know that you're in that 3-person race for the gold medal, that you were able to do it. I had like 10 seconds to be able to do that and cheer and kind of like wave and celebrate with Andrew Lewis, who was on the water with me that day. And then I turned around and the Peru sailor was jumping onto my boat and pulling me in the water to celebrate. And my breath just kept taken away because the water's freezing. But no, it was a really cool feeling. And we had the Canadian flag on a tiller extension in the motorboat in preparation for potentially winning. And, sailed all the way back to the harbor holding the Canadian flag up in the air. And it was just a really amazing feeling, to be honest. It was really cool.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much for taking us through that way, because it's a great story. I mean, I was following along. Obviously, there were so many things happening. I feel like that last day, there were other medal races where there like several, I think, on the same day, right?
Yeah, it was a jam-packed day. Like, I got on the water, 20 minutes later, you're running out to the pier with the Canadian flags because the next Canadian boat is either sailing out for the race or coming back in. And we just had a great team atmosphere where everyone was so supportive, and any chance we got to have someone leave the harbor, we were all leaving our boats, whatever state they were in, from rigging or de-rigging, and we were all running out to kind of show that Canadian support for the next group coming in. So I got to experience that when I came in with everyone, with their Canadian flags and cheering, and yeah, it was pretty cool.
All right, so moving on, as a veteran of the squad, you've been drafted to be one of our experts on this story. So the next biggest story, I would say, from the games was Sarah Douglas winning a silver medal. Tell me about her week.
Yeah, well, expert is a strong word. We'll see that. Sarah's just, a consummate professional. She is, the definition of what is needed to be done now to win in today's environment with full-time athletes. And, we'll get to other people on the team that I would say are very similar as well. And I would say everyone who was at the Pan Ams took it very serious and professional. But yeah, Sarah, you could tell coming in as the reigning champion from Peru in 2019, having won gold there, she had one goal in her mind, winning a medal, but also gold, I'm sure, was on her mind. So her and Erica Reinecke, great friends, training partners. Sarah's already back in Florida for the winter to train with Erica now. They kind of knew it was probably going to be a battle between the two of them. And from day one, you could see the results and the scores. They were going 1-2 back and forth kind of the entire time. And Erica, I think, just had a little bit extra speed, I think, on the week at the end of it, and was able to pull away from Sarah a little bit, which I'm sure Sarah wasn't happy about. But Sarah was able to easily walk away with the silver and, sailed really well and had, I think, moments where, she knows exactly what she needs to work on, but also areas where if I sail this well at the Olympics, I might have a silver medal at the Olympics, or if a couple races go my way, win the Olympics as well, right? I think both of those sailors, and Sarah specifically, they're in that conversation. They've shown it by winning regattas, and Princess Sophia or Here's or whatever it is. So yeah, she had a couple races where she ended up having bad races, coming second, and Erica won them, but you can't say it's an actual bad race at the Pan Ams.
Right.
16 boats or whatever the fleet was. So she should definitely be very happy with her silver, but I know her as an athlete, she's definitely hungry to turn it up a notch over the next year and try to put herself in a position at the Olympics again next time. So
right. And so then the next was our going through the medalists. Ali and Mariah getting the silver in the FX fleet, also qualifying the country, also beating Maggie Shea and Stephanie Roble, who I believe are generally higher ranked world sailing. So that's a good story as well.
Yeah, great story, and I think maybe even bigger than all that is Mariah's recent injury and kind of the adversity and getting herself back to being able to compete at that level is just a great testament to that team and that program of, getting over that hurdle and getting to the start line.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I forgot about that.
She has a knee injury, and she was wearing a brace and having to do a lot of warm-ups and physio and stuff even before getting on the water every day to really kind of make sure her knee was, not going to get any worse during the event or force them to kind of retire from races. So, there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff they've done over the last few months, just making sure that physically they were ready to go. But yeah, they sailed amazingly well. So I watched their medal race. That was like the only coverage and footage I actually saw. They actually had, essentially a tie, I think, between those three boats as well: Brazil, Canada, and the States. They had, the Canadian team, they did really well the last couple of days and got themselves back into that kind of tie and contention for any color of medal, and sailed a really good medal race, really fast, clean, and were able to beat, Steph and Maggie, who are, I would say, the Brazil team, the States and Canada, from what I saw. I see Brazil and the States from the results that I follow coming top 10 at big events and Olympics and stuff all the time. The Brazilian team won gold in Rio, right? And Ali and Mariah were right in that conversation all week with them and beat some of them, right? So I know that, that qualification against Antonia and Georgia and them is going to come down to, the actual athlete selection. So yeah, the FX is in the Olympics now, and we have two really strong teams to kind of battle it out over the next year. So they're all, I would say, trending in the right direction in that boat. And yeah, it was a great result for that team.
That's cool. And I mean, yes, excellent work, and proud of them. As a topic of the Pan Am Games, and we've got, I think that fleet was 7 or 8 as well. And very important for them to go down and get that country spot. Like, probably for most fleets, that's going to be our easiest way to qualify the country versus a world championship or the last chance regatta or whatever it is. But I think the Brazilian boat and the American boat were able to jump over and do the Europeans right away in 49er FX, and Ali Mariah weren't able to get over and do that. I think it was the next week. Georgia and Antonia were able to do that event. So if you think about the grand scheme of things and how important it is to sail against the best competition on earth versus coming down, maybe win a medal, maybe qualifying your country, there's definitely positives and negatives to that. Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah. The Pan Ams is a great opportunity to qualify the country because there's always country spots and maybe multiple in a smaller fleet, but it also not a lot of margin for error to get that spot versus someone like a Worlds. If there's 10 spots available, there might be more margin of error in a big fleet to just make sure you're within those top 10 countries to get one of the spots. And yeah, Antonio and Georgia did do the Europeans. I don't know exactly what they finished, but they were like top 15 at the Europeans. They actually did really well. So yeah, that is setting up definitely a battle royale where I think both teams are peaking at the right time. So,
oh yeah, we've been talking about that for years now. So then Justin Barnes and Will Jones getting a bronze in the 49er fleet as well. Excellent work for them. What do you have to say about their performance?
Yeah, they got a bronze and qualified the country as well, which is huge. Yeah, I think they were just, you know, steady, good results, kind of came in focused on keepers and just staying in the hunt. And I think they just executed their game plan extremely well. And they actually had a bit of a, you know, more of a mathematical scenario to try and get bronze with, I think, Mexico, where they needed to make sure they actually beat the Mexican boat for that final medal. So they kind of had that pressure scenario where it was not only they pretty much had to beat Mexico for the country qualification, I believe, and if they did that, they were going to get a bronze medal as well. So they had like those two things riding on the line for that last 20-minute race where, you know, I think Ali and Mariah, they had the spot lined up before the medal race. They were just focused on the color of the medals going in the race. But yeah, Will and Justin had kind of the double effect going into that. So you could tell the nerves were kind of running high. Definitely a stressful 20-minute race where, you know, anything can happen. You have a bad start or a bad tack in the 49er and this fleet spreads out pretty quick. But they were able to kind of execute their game plan. I know they chatted a lot with Fede, their coach, and they kind of loosely floated it by Luke and I during, you know, the day before the medal race. Like, what would you actually do? And we were kind of asking them questions like, how do you actually match race in a 49er? Like, what makes the most sense if it's going to be this much wind? Would you actually go and match race and do circles, or do you just position to windward or to leeward if you think you're faster than that boat, right? So, you know, Luke and I kind of took that approach during the week with a bunch of the teams, just like, we know you have your process and your normal coach, but if we can kind of ask some leading questions to make you think about things, yeah, so they kind of, you know, to Will and Justin, to their credit, they probably listened to Luke and I were like, yeah, that's fine, but we have our game plan already. But at least they kind of maybe like looked at that and said, okay, like, we hear you, but we want to go do this instead. And they executed their game plan, you know, perfectly.
So did they end up having to match race the Mexican boats? Did you know? I guess you watched it.
No, because like looking at the points here, it ended up only 6 points apart between Canada and Mexico. That's from third to fifth. So I think they again had like a 3-boat scenario where they kind of had to watch 2 boats at the same time. So it wasn't a full match race. They just wanted to make sure they beat Mexico. So I think they ended up starting to lure to Mexico just to make sure that they could kind of control that race.
Okay. So the next story, the heartbreaking. I had such a great time with Luke on the podcast. I had a regatta report when they did the Canadians and qualified.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be there with the other 2 members of his crew, but Luke didn't show. He was a no-show on the first podcast. So I had to kind of edit him in. And, for you know, obviously a consummate professional, I was surprised that I shouldn't say. Anyway, the second time when he did come on and I got to talk to him one-on-one, it was a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed talking to him. Such a smart, generous person, you know. So what can you tell me about the week that the Lightning crew had?
Yeah, I'd say the Lightning crew had like maybe the most adventurous road to get to the Pan Ams, and then the most adversity during the event itself. But yeah, when they get down there, they've chartered a Lightning. I went over and looked at it the first time. Some of the stuff just wasn't great. They had to go find other equipment and borrow from other boats. So they essentially put together this Frankenstein Lightning that they'd never sailed before. Tried to get it as fast as possible and rig the way they wanted it. And you know,
a Frankenboat.
And Luke being Luke was the first one down in the boat park and the last one to leave, and just making sure that his equipment and the boat is going to be the best it can be for the event. So yeah, they get to the start line. They haven't sailed that much together. It's a new boat, and they start to find their groove. You know, you could see the results. They actually start to put together 2s and 3s, and you know, they realize like, okay, after the first day, I think Luke came home and said, okay, we're actually in the hunt. We're fast enough that I know we can win a medal at the end of the week, which is a great feeling after day 1 versus going down there, putting this team together and then realizing like they're just not even in competition. Like they're just not fast enough. Like you can start to figure that out pretty quickly, but they kind of had all excitement and happy after day 1, knowing that they were in the hunt, which is, you know, very cool to experience for that team. And then the week, you know, unfolds for them, and I think it was race 7 and 8, so the 4th day of racing for them. They cross the finish line in one race so they're like 10 lengths away from the finish line. As Chile's crossing the finish line, Chile looks back and says protest to them for pumping the spinnaker. And I'm doing air quotes for the people not watching video. If you're on Spotify, it's like in the class rules for the Lightning, you're only allowed to touch the guy for repositioning the sail. You're not allowed to pump it and hold on to the rope itself. So Chile waited until they were pretty much at the end of the finish, yelled back to protest them for it. Luke and team didn't have time to do a 720. They also thought they weren't in the wrong. They were just soaking down to go further by the lead and make the finish line. So they were pulling the pole back, as you would in any boat, to rotate the spinnaker back to help you sail lower. So as that's happening, so that they know they're getting protested, they have one more race that day, race 8. They actually go out. They win race 8, and during race 8, they realize that their mast is broken. So underneath the deck, it's literally snapped in two. The bottom 18 inches is just completely separated. So that whatever they did to jury rig it during that race, they were able to keep the mast upright, and they actually
Could
won
you send
that
that to me so I can put it on? Not right now, but before we,
yeah.
So their mast is broken.
So that was, the penultimate day of fleet racing, race 7 and 8. So they come on shore and they have to do two things that night. So one, they have to prepare their statement and protest to try and defend themselves against Chile for this protest. And they have to go find a new mast through a charter boat. Luckily, the American team had an extra mast, so they were willing to lend to Luke and team. But, they get off the water at 6 p.m. They have to go through an entire protest. Eventually, through that proceeding, they ended up getting disqualified, which, is a pretty tough one to lose based on how it unfolded in the class rules and knowing that they weren't
Did the Chileans have a witness or something, or?
I think they brought in another boat as a witness and the Canadian team, because maybe so focused on the mast and trying to get ready to start again the next day, didn't bring in a witness and thought it was, everyone in the Canadian camp thought like, this is crazy. There's no way you're going to lose this. Just go in and outline the situation, how it happened. So yeah, unfortunately they get disqualified from that race. And then they spend the rest of the night putting the mast together, get down early again the next morning to make sure it's all rigged, ready to go. Even through all that, they still have a chance. They go out and have pretty good scores on race 9 and 10. And going into the medal race, they still had a chance for silver and bronze. Even in a 5-boat medal race, they were still within shooting distance of that. So I think with Chile, if they won the race, Chile came 5th, they would get silver. And they actually just needed one boat between them and I think it was Uruguay or something for bronze. So there was 2 scenarios where they could still get 2 different colors. And the medal race just really didn't go their way. Luke said and I was watching the tracker at that point, the second upwind, they just needed another length or 2 of speed where they would have got to the starboard lay line and Chile would have had to duck them and could have set up some scenarios on the last run. But we're that close to be able to kind of get into a position to start kind of creating scenarios and trying to put boats between people and mark traps and all those things. But I ended up just off the pace in that race and cross the line. And yeah, they ended up 4th in the regatta, just a couple points out of a medal. So through all that kind of story of coming together as a team, a protest and disqualification, a broken mast. So I'm sure, deep down disappointed of not winning a medal, being that close to it, but should also be very proud as a team of walking away with the scores they did, given all that they kind of went through during the week.
Yeah, heartbreaking, but yeah, they definitely can leave with their heads held high. And those 2 women, Rachel and Jessica, based on their social media reports, they seem to be having a great time. I'm sure they were working very hard trying to fix masts and everything as well. But what a great experience for them, for people that, taken under the wing of, this, incredible professional sailor for so many years, and they got to go down. They must have learned a ton. What a great experience for them.
Yeah, definitely. They had a lot of energy every day, which was kind of contagious. And yeah, they had a great time and yeah, definitely learned a ton about a big games experience like that. And also, yeah, being in a boat with Luke for a week, anyone's going to come out, a better sailor than they went in for sure. So
that was Jessica Hirschball and Rachel Green, who were the crew. As a sidebar, would you say, as a person who's sailed major multi-sport regattas and just major world championships and so forth, how much experience first time out at a games or the first time out at a world championships, there's got to be, you must just be in awe. Like it must be really hard just to sail around with boats that have different color sails on them or different colored flags on them and stuff. Like, would you say that you really kind of got to get through it a couple times even to feel like you can have any kind of result?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, it is a different experience completely. Don't get me wrong. Like, for example, I did the Toronto 2015 Pan Am Games. I had nerves. The first race of that, I actually flipped over on a roll tack on the first downwind or a
oh
roll
my
jive,
God.
but that race ended up getting abandoned and restarted.
Oh,
And then at the Olympics, I remember day one, race one, my legs were shaking for the first like 3 minutes hiking upwind. And you have to tell yourself, like, I've raced against these 45 other guys 100 times before. Like, you need to get yourself settled down and just get back into a boat race. And I said at the start of this podcast, sailing's like a week-long competition. You can't be so excited, or, you have to control your highs and lows and be able to kind of perform for 7 days in a row, right? So I've kind of experienced both of those where, yeah, I performed really well in Toronto. I kind of had an underperformance in Rio. So I've kind of seen both ends of the spectrum, I think, which helped me walk in and feel this was like the least nerves I've had on day one, where I kind of like knew what to expect coming into this games. But yeah, for someone walking in on their first event, like there's security every morning to get into the venue, and you have to go through media every day, and you have to do the formal check-in process, and like there's a lot more bits and pieces to it. And then you're the one Canadian boat for that class, and your sail only says Canada. There's no sail numbers, and it's sometimes a small thing to think about. Instead of like a 6-digit number, you just have Canada. But as an athlete, like you're trying to get to that event and to that milestone, and then you actually see it on your sail, and that's your identification to represent the entire country. Like there's a whole bunch of things that definitely, yeah, give you some nerves on day one or day two or however fast you get over it.
right, right, right. So next story up for me is the women's kite, Emily Bujea, getting a country spot.
Yeah, big win getting into that event for sure. So yeah, kudos to Emily for kind of getting the country spot and ticking that box on the road for herself and for Canada. The kiteboarders were at a different venue. They were launching at a beach around the corner. So on competition days and actually seeing racing, like I didn't get to see a lot of her racing or Mac stuff or talk to her that much. Um, but the one thing I'll say, it's a tough fleet. It's a new discipline. There's huge learning curves, and I think there's pretty big kind of differences between the top of the fleet and someone just getting in it. But there's massive opportunity to kind of jump in. And my conversations with Emily, she's very excited to kind of work through the analytical side of it. Like she is an extremely smart individual. There's a lot of data that you can get now from the trackers and from your own sensors on your boats and GPS. And she was ready, like the moment the regatta was done and she qualified, to open up her computer and start spending like her rest couple weeks of like downtime to actually start to analyze the data. Like what are the top things I need to work on to make the biggest gains before the Olympics next summer and the qualification. And, that'll help inform like what you focus your training on, or maybe what venues you go around the world to do your training camps and stuff. So yeah, that was a big win for Canada to get that spot. And yeah, I've been in that position where you qualify the country and then you still have to go through the actual athlete qualification, and knowing that you want to get better during that entire period as well to kind of peak at the Olympics the next summer as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, cool story.
yeah, it's a great, and it's like I say, I think there's two or three other women that are close to her. I should know their names, but I think that Emily comes from a sailing background, like she raced 29ers and so forth, and the other two women are more kiters just from background and so forth. So it's an interesting mix there. And sticking with the kites, I know Mac Moran had a disappointing finish, wasn't able to qualify the country, but he did port tack the fleet at one point. And just after Lee Parkhill sailing in with the Canadian flag, for me, for the highlights of the social media was Mac just killing that port tack start. It must be so scary to do that in those boats.
Yeah, you'd have to have a lot of confidence and know that there's enough space to do that in that boat for sure. But yeah, Mac, very excited to be there, was constantly just trying to get better every day. The definition of what you would want in a sailor. Port tax a fleet, comes back just, very excited to tell everyone, and had some good scores. He was kind of in the mix somewhere between 5 and 8 every time. I think the top couple athletes again were, some of the best in the world actually in his fleet. Sorry. Um, yeah. So interesting that you mentioned like Emily coming from a sailing background versus someone who's just pure kite foiling. I think one of the big things for that fleet in general is, like Mac clearly has sailing skills where he understands like there's a skew on the start line. I could protect the fleet right now and get an advantage. Versus I think some of the people are just, straight into kite foiling and know how to make that go fast, but maybe some of the sailing IQ around match racing and how you read wind shifts and things like that. I think the people that are going to start to do really good in that class are people that can marry those two things together. Like need for speed, they can push the kite, make it go really fast and kind of not be worried about crashing and getting hurt at those big speeds. Like you need to be able to get yourself over that hurdle to make the kite perform as fast as it can. But then you also need to have really good starting and tactics and have that kind of sailing base as well and put those two things together to get to, the top of the world in that sport.
Yeah, it's fascinating for sure. And he was also on the podcast. Great guy. Obviously, has worked really hard for that fleet, organizing regattas.
Yeah,
Helped
definitely.
Emily a lot and stuff. So, best of luck. I don't know if he has one or they definitely have the last chance regatta in Yale, but I don't know if there is another opportunity for the men's kite bowlers or not.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but I know there's at least one more event
Yeah.
to continue qualification. Yeah.
And then to me, the most on the tracker anyway, for me, the most exciting fleet to watch was the Ilka Sevens and Fila Karim, who's also great on the podcast and followed him for a while and a great sailor. And it didn't work out for him. And I think you said you were sailing next to the laser fleet, so you've got some firsthand knowledge of that.
Yeah, the Sunfish and the Laser shared a course, so we alternated start times. So any day the Laser radial started at 1, the Sunfish started at 3, or vice versa. And then that, trading of coaches and all that took place during the event. But yeah, just with my kind of history in the Laser and knowing a lot of the guys in that fleet still, and obviously wanting to support Fila and Sarah as much as I could, I would often, as you're sailing out, if I was a 3 o'clock start, I'd launch at 2, and it just usually lined up where the second race of those fleets, I would stay at the windward mark and watch the windward mark surroundings and the reaches. Or if I finished on the 1 o'clock start time, I'd be sailing in on my own after my races, and I would go sail up to the windward mark and park there, and I'd be able to see their first race of the day come up to the windward mark and the reach and stuff. So it was fun to kind of just share a course with them and see a lot of the racing firsthand instead of just watching the tracker the whole time. And the Laser has bigger fleets even in the Pan Ams, right? They had, I think, 20 boats. And I think Fila ended up 7th, just missed the country spot by a few points against Aruba. But he sailed really well, like Fila had pretty much everything between 3 to 12 was getting a lot of 6s and 7s, and that's where he ended up in the regatta. And going into the last race, it was pretty much between him and Aruba, between who would get the country spot. And Aruba had, I think, a 1 and a 7 on the last day, and Fila had like a 6 and a 7, and that ended up being the point differential. They were pretty much tied going into that day. So Aruba had, an incredible final day, and Fila kind of sailed the average of what he did on the week. So can't fault him for, choking or having a bad last day. I think Aruba just actually sailed really well on the last day. And any mark roundings I saw, kind of first reaches, Fila was always up in the front of the fleet, right? I saw him anywhere from kind of 3 to 10 most reaches, so was sailing, good starts, good first upwinds. In that fleet of 20 boats, I think the leeward gate kind of resets that race quite a bit, with the fleet coming around so tight and restarting on the gates. And I wasn't watching all the races and can't comment on exactly what worked or didn't work the second laps, but there was often times where, just a couple points, Field might go back a couple points during the race if he was 5th at the windward mark and finished a 7th. And I think, he missed out on the country spot, but also if you convert some of those 5s into 3s or some of those 8s into 6s, if a couple races go his way, I think he's actually in contention or conversation for that medal race and for a medal as well, right? So the Laser, that kind of just shows how tight that racing is, and how the margin of error is so small. you kind of have to like be on your game for the entire 45 minutes around both laps, right? Because everyone's just so tight around the course versus the Sunfish. We did start to spread out a little bit on the second laps, and there was only 8 of us versus 20, right? Like a slow downwind might lose me 1 point, where a slow downwind might cost the Laser 5 or 6 boats if everyone's really close together, right?
Right. So. Unfortunate that we didn't get the spot. He, Canada didn't get the spot. Yeah. But it was, like I say, I don't think their medal race was broadcast, or certainly I couldn't find it. But the tracker was fun to watch, which means it was an exciting fleet for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And the Laser, we have a great group of guys, Fila and the other Laser squad. They have, I think, I heard 6 spots still available at the next Worlds. And we kind of did some quick back of the envelope math. And if someone comes like top 30 at the Worlds, there's a great chance that they'll be within the top 6 countries as well. So, there is, a big squad where, a lot of them are starting to get pretty good. And, there is a bunch of spots still available for the country. So, I'm hopeful that, they in January can get that spot at the Worlds, and it's in Adelaide, Australia. So.
Right. So, we have the Adelaide Worlds and then the Last Chance Regatta. Now, I know you're not, not with Sail Canada, but if we didn't get the spot, I would imagine that I don't know what the individual qualification would be. Let's say Canada gets the spot in Australia at the Worlds. Would then Palma be the regatta that they would choose? The actual
so for the actual athlete qualification.
Yes, athlete.
Yeah. So for most classes, there's some caveats based on if you have like a standout performance, but for most classes, it's going to be a combination of their Worlds in 2014 and Palma. It's either Palma or Hier's in the spring. So it'll be the combination of those 2 scores. So if you come 20th at the Worlds and then 20th at that next World Cup event, you'll have 40 points total, and then how that ranks against the other Canadians will select the athlete.
Right. But so if we don't get a spot at Worlds, then there's the Last Chance Regatta, which I think is a new thing, which is in Yale. So then,
but that'll like override as a country qualification. But then for the athlete, I think it'll fall back to you still need to do the Worlds at that.
Wow.
Yeah,
so they could have. Anyway, anyone who's
it starts to
watching
get
this
complicated.
sport, it gets complicated, and there's a bunch of guys that are really working hard. There are a lot of young guys in the Ilka 7 fleet, so it's something to watch. It's going to be fun for those of us who follow the sport.
Definitely,
and best of luck to those guys for sure. And then we had the NACA 17, Maddie and Galen, who are pretty new to the class, and even admitted or told me on the 2024 is not a goal for them. They're working towards 2028, but they went down there and they got to sail with some of the best in the world.
Yeah, I mean, whether 2024 is a realistic goal or not for them, going to the Pan Ams is a huge accomplishment and a huge experience to just have that learning curve and kind of seeing what a big games is about. To our conversation a couple of minutes ago around the nerves of the big games, having done that once is only going to help prepare you for that next one. And I think a great testament to that team is that, they knew they weren't going in to win a gold medal, but on kind of like day 1, day 2, chatting with Galen, he says, we're pretty far off the pace of the top 3 boats. And then day 3, he said, we got a little bit closer today. And then by the last day, he's like, we're actually in the mix, and we were ahead of some of them at the Woodward Mark, and we're in the race at the end of the week with people that at the start of the week we couldn't even touch during the race, right? So I think that's just a great example of team getting to experience the big games, maybe not having a performance goal of winning a medal, but taking every opportunity to get as much experience as they can and showing that improvement every day. To really kind of get closer in contention. And they're on this massive learning curve in this boat, right? So every day they're on their water, they're learning new stuff about how to set up the boat and tune it and all these things. And to show them just, even though the results weren't there, they were able to mentally stay like, we know that, but we're going to try and get closer and closer to the top teams every single day. And they were able to do that. So,
and, sailors with great pedigree. And I do expect great things from them in the future. So, good work. for Maddie and Galen. And then last we had Rebecca Heller, who was our IQ foil, a brand new class. I don't think she hasn't been sailing at all that much either. It's got to be really tough conditions for that as well.
Yeah, tough conditions with the big waves and swell, and yeah, I mean they're all wearing helmets, so you know it's a crazy boat to begin with. You add on the breeze and the swell and the cross chop and very challenging conditions, and I'd say similar probably to what Maddie and Galen experienced from our first big games, lining up against the best of the world and just trying to improve every single day. And I think that fleet has time limits where if the first boat crosses the finish
Oh,
line, a
right.
2 minute clock kicks in. And if you don't cross the finish line within 2 minutes, all those people get time limit expired, which doesn't tell the whole story of someone's results. If, like, again, the start of the week, maybe the time limit expired and you're 5 minutes behind that and not even close. But I think Rebecca was starting to get better and better every day, just like Maddie and Galen. And, some of the ones that might show time limit expires, Kenny and team who are out there on the water coaching stuff, like the time difference, it was like seconds away from crossing the finish line and actually getting that result on the scorecard versus not. And I think there was a lot of people in the regatta in that boat. And if you have the people winning the gold medal who are some of the best in the world, they're setting that gold standard of like, this is how fast you can actually sail this IQ foil around the course. So yeah, to actually get yourself into contention in that fleet when it is a new boat and there's not a lot of people in Canada actually sailing them to train against and stuff. So yeah, interesting sport to watch and dynamic, and their courses are crazy with their slalom medal races, and it's really kind of pushing the boundaries of sailing and traditional sailing of what we think of, and just your standard displacement boat and windward lured course. Those days are fewer and far between as these new high performance boats are coming into play as well. So
Yeah, certainly. Thinking of sailing a windsurfer in front of my cottage in 1985 is quite a lot different than what they're doing out there now.
yeah,
um,
definitely.
and it's good to know that, and for people who might have been looking at the scoreline for that if she has a bunch of DNFs, that she could have just been 2 minutes and 3 seconds behind the first boat. So
Yeah,
um, excellent. And just I think just to have gotten there to qualify in Clearwater and to get down there and do that big regatta, have the experience of a multi sport regatta is really worthwhile.
100%. You can never replicate it and replace that experience anywhere else. So just getting there is a huge accomplishment for every team that was down there. So
Well, Lee, if you could wrap up the experience, I mean, from what I saw on social media, there certainly seemed to be a really great team atmosphere. Uh, maybe more so than other events. Maybe having the other fleets, the non-Olympic class fleets there, and being so close to the venue and so forth, might have made it a recipe for a lot of fun and a lot of great spirit.
yeah, I don't know if I've ever experienced a regatta in my entire career where the team was so connected. From like the moment we got on off the plane in Chile, we were just like a unified team. Everyone was excited to be there with each other, sharing stories and joking around, and pretty much every day having breakfast together and having dinner together. We ended up having like our own Team Canada tables in the food hall that all the other countries knew, like, don't sit there, those are Canada's tables. Every sailor from every fleet and coach is going to end up there, and we would eat and then end up playing like bananagrams or just like random little games together where all the other countries were kind of going to do their own things and maybe had a couple friends that they were close with, but we really had great kind of team spirit and camaraderie, and that showed all the way through to the medal race days of all of us waving flags and cheering for everyone. And it was a cool experience. I think we hit 90% of the goals that we set out at the beginning of the week in terms of medals and country qualification. And yeah, Kenny and Mike on the ground did a great job just making sure everyone had everything we needed to perform at our best, and all the coaches doing double shifts pretty much every day. Just the whole kind of collective group of Canadian sailors really kind of came together to put the performance together that we did. So yeah, it was special to be a part of. I was happy that I was able to go and be part of it for sure.
Lee Parkhill, thank you so much for your time and telling us these stories. I mean, there's a lot in there that I had no idea, and I follow this stuff as absolutely closely as I can. So thank you for sharing, and congrats again on the gold medal.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate this. And once again, thank you for putting this show together for everyone in Canada to listen and share stories.
You're welcome. So this is Pan Am Games Regatta Report. As I say, have fun, sail fast, make friends. I'll see you on the water.